This is Mike Corey from ESPN, and you're listening to the Sports Objective Podcast, the unofficial podcast of the Pirates.
My heart is purple and gold. I'm a pirate down to my soul, and I don't back down, not at all. Find out when the cannons explode. From the sidelines down to the post, put it down like not even close. All out to the last whistle blow. From the flag with the skull and crossbones. Everybody stand up.
Welcome into the Sports Objective. We appreciate everyone tuning in whenever and however you're watching or listening, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, or pretty much anywhere podcasts are found, you can find us. Very excited for tonight's show. Several months back, and we had Charlie Ward on the program, and tonight, very excited to catch up with another former Florida State quarterback. And as you see there on the screen, that is, of course, Brad Johnson. Brad, welcome into the show. We appreciate your time this evening.
Awesome. I appreciate you having me on the show, and we'll have fun and tell some stories and see where it goes. So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I was telling you when I reached out to set this up on social media, we had crossed paths back in the late 90s. I guess it was the summer of 1997. You were during your professional career. You were your final couple years in Minnesota with the Vikings, and you were working Gus Purcell quarterback camp at Wingate University right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And you and Heath Schuler were there. And I was certainly aware of you prior to them, but that was certainly a tremendous experience, having the opportunity to learn from two NFL quarterbacks like yourselves.
Yeah, it was a fun time. Gus Purcell football camp is at Wingate College there in Charlotte, and that was a real football camp. That was a 5-day camp. 8 stations were 35-minute stations. So it wasn't about pool parties, or it wasn't about getting a 4 or 5 star rating. It was just pure football at its finest. There was I don't even know if there was water jugs out there. It was all about throwing the football, and a lot of great quarterbacks, a lot of great coaches came through that camp, and so I got a lot of great memories there too.
Yeah, like you're saying, there was nothing. I mean, you paid your money, but you came to work and you got 8, 9, 10 hours of work in for those 4 or 5 days that you were there at Wingate, and it certainly paid off. And a lot of tremendous quarterbacks there, learning from you guys. But you're a North Carolina native. You're from the mountains, Black Mountain, Owen High School. So just tell us a little about your childhood before we dive into your time at Florida State. And you just talk about, I know you were a 2-sport athlete, not only in high school, or maybe more than that, but I know at least football and basketball.
Yeah, I grew up in Black Mountain, North Carolina. Went to Owen High School, right next to Asheville, is the big city. And my dad ran summer camps at Camp Ridgecrest and Camp Crestridge. So I grew up with a ball in my hand. I was jumping in the lake. I was in the gym. I was playing 2-square, 4-square, soccer, archery, riding horsebacks. I grew up in camp. So love sports, love being around people, and always had someone usually better or bigger to play against in those camps. But I played football, baseball, basketball as a little kid. And then about 12 years old, I stopped playing baseball, and then really just started playing 2 sports. That was football and basketball. So basketball was my passion. And I never missed a day of playing from 2nd grade all the way through my freshman year of college. And then at some point I had to make a choice which one I was going to thrive in later in college and hopefully the pros. It ended up being football. But I grew up in a great household with my family. My mom was a high school principal, and I always had a key to any gym I wanted to get into.
You talk about basketball being your passion, growing up there in the North Carolina mountains, who were some of your who was your favorite team, or maybe some of your favorite players growing up?
Yeah, I grew up at basketball. It was all about North Carolina basketball. Dean Smith was you watched his show on Sunday afternoons, didn't miss any basketball games. The ACC, great teams back then, Virginia with Ralph Sampson, Lynn Bias at Maryland. And I know we're going back in the day for a lot of people, but these were legends at the time. And obviously Michael Jordan at North Carolina. But at my high school, at one time, Roy Williams, he's the coach there, who just retired at North Carolina, Hall of Fame coach. And then the basketball player was Brad Daugherty. So I always had somebody to look up to. Obviously, he was 7 foot tall, but he was about 4 or 5 years in front of me. He kind of set the standard of basketball and what it took to be an All-American at Owen High School. And then he became an All-American in college and NBA All-Star. And the other player my dad would actually take me to go see when I was a youngster too was Buzz Peterson, who played at Asheville High School, and he ended up playing North Carolina. But just great players. So you saw guys with great work ethic and reached their peaks of their career.
Sure, you mentioned Buzz Peterson. I'm very familiar with Coach Peterson, as I know him. Just from his days, he had 2 different stints at App State as head coach, also UNC Wilmington, etc. So, and then obviously very close relationship from his North Carolina days, and that bond with Michael Jordan, where a lot of his teams received those benefits from that relationship with MJ. But talk about your recruitment to Florida State, and then some of the other programs you considered, like I mentioned, and you've already referenced as well. Playing 2 sports with the Seminoles. What other programs, if any, like who else offered you that possibility to play 2 sports at such a high level?
Yeah, in high school, I mean, my whole life, basketball was my passion. I actually quit football my senior year, going into my senior year. Didn't really have a great experience, to be honest with you, my freshman, sophomore, junior year as far as winning games. I wasn't really developed at football. And then we had a new coach, Kenny Ford, who came to be the new head coach at Owen High School. And he was a young guy. He was positive. He taught me. I missed the first 3 days of practice. And he called me and we talked on the phone. He taught me into coming out and playing football again, So he said it's going to be a great time. We're going to win a bunch of games. And that year we did. I think we got to the quarterfinals, but really kind of made football fun for me. And but I couldn't decide what sport I wanted to play. I'd made All-American in football. I was an all-state basketball player in high school, scored 2,400 points, and that was my passion. But I didn't the teams, in the recruitment process, it was an interesting call because I wanted to go to North Carolina, and they said I could come there, but I knew I wasn't really probably that good enough to play and start, And so the guy that I really want to play for was a guy named Bobby Crimmins at Georgia Tech. I went to all his camps at Appalachian State, went to all his camps when he was at Georgia Tech. And so he pulled me into his office and he said, this is my senior year. In February, my senior year, he said, Brad, you have a scholarship here, but only play 5 guys. And the guy that's coming in your spot is a guy named Dennis Scott. And Dennis Scott was a McDonald's All-American and ended up being 11 years in the NBA playing for Orlando Magic. And he said, Brad, you'll play behind him. And that wasn't what I wanted to hear, but he was honest with me. And so then he says, what do you think about all of it? And I said, well, I have more potential in football, but basketball I'm better at now. He says, well, what do you think your long haul is? I said, I probably need to go football. So he was honest with me. He gave me where I stood. And so then it came down, my football schools were basically North Carolina, Florida State, and Alabama. And so I took my trip to Florida State and just loved it there. Felt like it was a great place where I could play, be developed under Mark Richt and Bobby Bowden, and just felt like it would be home to me. And so I'm thankful for Bobby Crimmins helping me out in my decision. Dennis Scott probably doesn't know who I am. He changed my life. And then had a great time at Florida State.
You talk about Bobby Bowden. Obviously, unfortunately, we lost Coach Bowden here very recently, in the last several months. And, just tell us about just Bobby Bowden, just such a legendary head coach and so many wins, but then known for so much more as well. I remember watching his coaching show growing up with my dad. I don't know if it's on Fox Sports South, I guess. And Coach Bowden, I would always love it when he'd talk about, that's old E.G. Green, or when his mom makes the best apple pie, and some of those off the wall comments like that.
Yeah, no doubt. Coach Bowden, he coached at Florida State for 34 years. I don't know if you'll find many coaches that'll be in one place for that long anymore in today's age. But he recruited me. He came up to my house and he gave the spiel of why to come to Florida State. And I had the nerve to ask him 2 questions. I said, you going to play the best player? He said, yep, I'm here to win. And 2, I said, well, how many more years are you going to coach? At that time, I think he was like 63. We thought he was old at that time. And he lived to 90-something years old and coached. He was like 84, I think, somewhere in there. Somewhere, I don't know, 80. I'm not sure how old. But at that time, he had 165 wins. And my junior year, I think we ended up winning the 200th win. And we had a 1 o'clock, he called a special 1 o'clock meeting on a Tuesday. And usually we started our meetings at 1:30. And I told my roommate, I said, listen, I think he's getting ready to retire. I don't know. I just kind of got a weird feeling about this. But he actually, in that the first 30 minutes, he actually gave his testimony. And it's really pretty cool. I don't know if you'll get that from very many coaches in this day and age. And then he didn't retire. He went on to win another 175 more games, ended up winning 370-something games. And it was pretty incredible. When I look back at his career, I said that was my coach. Even though my career didn't go as well as I wanted to at Florida State, I had all the respect in the world for Coach Bowden, the players he brought in, the coaches that he developed also. And he was just a man of character, shared his faith with everyone, and took Florida State. He won a couple national championships. It's pretty awesome to look back and say that was my coach. And he changed generations, because a lot of us as players, when we look back, we want to kind of emulate what he did for us as a coach. A lot of us have become coaches, husbands, people in our community, and just impact lives like he did.
Now, during those years, obviously, then on throughout the 90s, Coach Bowden and that Florida State program, so much success. At that time, it was, major 1A independent. And during those years, just year in, year out, competing for national championships or, consistently in the top 5, 10 in the country. But, talk about that transition from the high school ranks to, competing for a starting job. Peter Tom Willis was in the program, Casey Weldon. But at the same time, you were playing basketball. So right. Discuss those dynamics.
Yeah, coming out of North Carolina, I was made All-American. And when you stretch at Florida State, the number one guy, he starts at the 50-yard line, number 2 guys at the 45, the number 3 guys at the 40, the 4th guys, it goes on down. So I was about the 10-yard line stretching. I was a 7th-string quarterback when I first stepped on campus. And so it was humbling experience, but I wasn't ready to play at that time. And but I went there to Florida State on a football scholarship. And my freshman year, I actually asked to be redshirted. And at that time, most freshmen did get redshirted. That was part of you kind of hoped it to get an extra year. And so we were about October took place. I was helping run scout team. And then I went to Coach Bowden and said, listen, I'm not doing much on scout team either, but could I go try out for the basketball team? And I was on football scholarship. But then he said, yeah, go ahead and do it, buddy. And he called everybody buddy. And so I went out for the basketball program. I started about 13 games that year, went to the NCAA tournament. It was pretty awesome. I was playing against some legends of Never Nervous Purvis Ellison at Louisville and Bimbo Coles at Virginia Tech, who played in the Olympics, and Elliot Perry at Memphis State. And so, but I went through that year, and then we made the NCAA tournament, but we played so long in the basketball that it's 20 days of spring football practice that I missed the first 10 days of practice. So that year went on. The next year I went through football, but that had to go the whole football season. So I came into basketball like in late December and January. So I was late into basketball season. Then went to the NCAA tournament again in basketball, and I missed 10 more days of spring football. So Coach Bowden and I talked. He said, bro, you can play both sports here, but you're kind of falling behind a little bit in football, a little bit in basketball. And so I ended up making the decision just to play straight up football. That was what I devoted myself to go there for. But it was competitive. I mean, the guys you said, we had Danny McManus, who played in the Canadian League and like 18 years through 52,000 yards, and Chip Ferguson, who had won a Sugar Bowl, and Peter Tom Willis, who played for the Chicago Bears for 4 years, and Casey Weldon was with me. He was runner-up to the Heisman and played in the NFL for 8 years, and Charlie Ward won a Heisman and played in the NBA for 11 years, and Chris Winkie, he won Heisman National Championship, and then Kenny Felder was a second-round baseball pick. So you talk about being competitive. We all thought each other stunk. We all thought each other were the top dog, but each one of us have great friendships, great respect for each other, and it was you just had to work for those opportunities.
And obviously, later on, after you had left Florida State, the move was made, bringing Florida State into the ACC, and the ACC seeking to become relevant in football. So I think Florida State basketball actually got, I think some people maybe didn't realize exactly how good the Seminoles were on the hardwood because they were so good in football. And I remember those teams there in the early 90s under Coach Pat Kennedy that, went into the Smith Center and the Dean Dome and won, and did that at several ACC venues and were very competitive right off the bat with Sam Cassell and so forth. But just talk about Coach Kennedy before we jump back into football, and you referenced the old Metro Conference because I was talking about the Seminoles being obviously independent in football, but the Metro Conference that you referenced, Metro was tremendous.
Yeah. The Metro, in football, it was independent. Basketball, we're the Metro. So South Carolina, Southern Miss, Virginia Tech, Cincinnati, Louisville, Memphis State were the teams, but I think basically. And our basketball team was really, really good. Our best player ended up being George McLeod. He just had his jersey retired at Florida State and had a long NBA career. And we won the Metro. We won the regular season of Metro my second year. I think at one time we were like 19-2, and then went to the NCAA tournament, and it was a lot of fun. And then, but later those basketball teams you're talking about in the early 90s, I went on that when they went to ACC. That was Charlie Ward, Sam Cassell, Rodney Dobard, Doug Edwards, and Bob Sura. And I mean, it's just a loaded talent. But Coach Kennedy is great to play for, and I'm thankful for those opportunities playing against some great competition, obviously.
So, moving back to football, and like you said, that became your focus there after a couple of years. So just talk about the success and those battles. We talked about Peter Tom Willis and Casey Weldon. I know one of those seasons was it your junior year that you started the first half of the season, and then the coaching staff went in a different direction.
Yep, no doubt. My freshman year got redshirted. And then I came back, and then we had Chip Ferguson and Peter Tom Willis, and you're just fighting for reps in practice, and everything was competitive. We were competitive playing checkers or the board game Risk or tennis together. I mean, we were all great friends, but it was competitive just to earn that spot. I won the spot my junior year, and I thought I was playing pretty well, but the coaches decided to make a change to my best friend, Casey Weldon. And, I learned a lesson. The more you pull against somebody, the better that they do. So I pulled against Casey, and he ended up having a tremendous career at Florida State. And they said, it looked a lot like Joe Montana. So it was pretty awesome. We were number one in the country our senior year, and we had the wide right field goal that we pretty much didn't win the national championship that year. But Casey and I had a great friendship, and he played 8 years in the NFL. And when we played for Washington, we were on the same team together, and then he's my backup there. But just a great friendship to this day. But what you loved was the competition part about it. And I remember, going against our defense, thinking about going against Deion Sanders and Prime Time and Leroy Butler, who just made the Hall of Fame, and Terrell Buckley, one of the best corners ever in Florida State history, and Dedrick Dodge, who played in the NFL for 7 years, and Martin Mayhew, who had a 14-year career for the Redskins. Like, it was just competitive in practice. That's what I remember. So I love playing at Florida State. When I got there in 87, that was the beginning of a 14-year run where Florida State won over 10 games and finished the top 4 for 14 straight years. So it's pretty awesome time.
Next question, kind of a two-part question, but I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but can you dive into your memory bank, from Coach Bowden standpoint, maybe a good story or two about Coach, and then also maybe a game or two that really stand out. Maybe it was because of the way you performed, or a game that just stood out because it meant so much to the team. You referenced one that stood out in a bad way, like on the wide right, but
right. Coach Bowden, he was just. I remember had a lot of wisdom to him. It was simple wisdom. And I remember one day he was getting on to us about. We weren't throwing the go ball, the long ball, very good. And so he came in the meeting room and on the whiteboard at that time, and he drew a mountain. We're sitting at our desk and we're watching all this film, but he gets on. He said, "I got something. I don't think we're throwing the go ball very well, guys. We got all these All-Americans at receiver, big tall guys, big fast guys, but we're missing them." So he draws a stick figure as a quarterback. He draws a stick figure of a quarterback holding the football. He draws a mountain, and he tries to show this ball. It can't be thrown through the mountain. it's got to be thrown over the mountain. And you got to let it come high and let it drop in. And we don't want that ooh-ah ball where, we miss the receiver. It looks like it's going to be great. And then we go, because we miss him and throw it out of bounds. So he made this, it was a 15-minute demonstration about how to throw a go ball. It was just on the grease board. But it was a lot of simple wisdom to him, but he was awesome to play for, a great play caller, always had the flair for, the game I remember, one of the most people remember the most was Florida State playing at Clemson. He called the punt Rooski. He was always known for running, reverses or trick plays. And the punt Rooski, that's a play that will go down forever where we had a punt and we were losing to Clemson and ran a fake punt on our own 20-yard line with like a minute to go. And then we went down and kicked the game-winning field goal. So that was a memorable game playing for Coach Bowden.
Yeah, you talk about throwing the deep ball. That's something, being a quarterback myself that, I really pay a lot of attention to. And as you can tell, I'm a big East Carolina fan, a guy that was playing for the Pirates right around your era, and then also lit it up for a few seasons in the NFL with the Cincinnati Bengals, made a Pro Bowl. Jeff Blake, he had a tremendous deep ball, like you said, threw it with just the right trajectory. And then also later on, a guy that played for East Carolina and then the Jacksonville Jaguars as a starter, David Garrard.
Yep, no doubt. My first roommate at Minnesota was an East Carolina guy. It was Luke Fisher, tight end.
Yep.
Roommate, my first year in Minnesota. So, and actually Coach Mark Rick, he's not my brother-in-law. He actually went to East Carolina one year and coached Jeff Blake one of those years. And
1989.
That was it. So he's thankful for that opportunity too.
Yeah, definitely. That was a tremendous staff. Bill Lewis's first staff. You didn't realize how good it was at the time, but there was an article about it. I don't know if it's SB Nation or one of those websites put out an article about that 1989 coaching staff that Bill Lewis assembled. You had Steve Logan, who went on to become East Carolina's head coach for 11 seasons. You had Mark Richt, as you referenced, as offensive coordinator. Steve Shankweiler, who's been an OC and also coached offensive line for 40 years plus. You had Jeff Jagosinski, who went on to be an NFL OC and Boston College head coach, and then several others. It was an unbelievable staff.
It was, and Coach Rick, he was my QB coach my first 2 years at Florida State. He left my third year to become the coordinator there at East Carolina. And then he came back as our QB coach after 1 year at East Carolina. But he said that was one of the best things he ever did in his career because of all the great coaches there and just that opportunity. He learned a lot about himself and just becoming a coach and leading other people. And then he's able to use that in his career back with us at Florida State. Then obviously a head coach at Georgia and then University of Miami. So no, that was definitely a loaded group of guys, And
since Coach Rick came up, I certainly was going to bring him up anyway with your relationship, him being your brother-in-law. But, Coach Rick, how is he doing? Because obviously anybody that follows the game was aware of his health situation.
Yeah, you know what? He came out about a year ago and announced that he had Parkinson's. So, you know what? He's doing good. He's actually now he works with the ACC network and kind of calling those games and on the huddle, ACC huddle, and talks about it. Things. Yeah, he has slowed down a little bit, but he's still. If you talk to him, he's still normal. He's excited about life, about football. He speaks a lot of different places, and so we see him. He lives in Athens. We see him there a bunch, and then he goes down to Destin quite a bit. And you'll see, on TV, you'll kind of see some of the stuff in the background, the ocean and stuff like that. But he's doing great, and they have 3 grandbabies now with his younger son, John Richt, and they have two girls and just a newborn baby, so baby boy. But they're doing great.
Awesome to hear. Definitely a lot of admiration for Coach Rick and everything he was able to accomplish. Obviously, as part of Coach Bowden's staff, and then there for years at Georgia, laying the foundation for what Kirby Smart's and been able to take it to a national championship level. But going back to your, moving on from your time with the Seminoles, just talk about that opportunity to play professional football. You did it for 15 years, 4 different teams, and Vikings, Redskins, Bucks, and then another stint with the Vikings, then the Cowboys. So just talk about those, 6 or 7 seasons with the Minnesota Vikings playing for the late Denny Green.
Yep. I was, it was kind of unique. I go back a little bit to Florida State where Casey Weldon and I, and then 2 other quarterbacks, Mark Brunell and Billy Joe Hobart, the University of Washington. So it's the only time 2 quarterbacks have ever come in the same time and actually be drafted the same year. And all 4 of us made it into the NFL. So pretty unique looking back at that. But I was drafted in the 9th round, 227th pick to the Minnesota Vikings, and just thankful for that opportunity. The guy that actually drafted me was a guy named Jack Burns. He recruited me in high school. He knew my story about not playing that much in college. I knew I was a basketball, football guy, but I was a late bloomer. So I was fortunate at that time where a lot of times in the NFL now they just keep 2 quarterbacks. And so when I went to Minnesota, there was Rich Gannon and Wade Wilson and Sean Salisbury. And they actually cut Wade Wilson from me, who later Wade became my QB coach in Dallas at the end of my career. He actually just passed away a few years back. But my first couple years in the league, I didn't get many snaps. Not in games, I'm talking about in practice. And so I really just kind of immersed myself into a system and learned that system inside out, and was there in Minnesota for 7 years. I played behind my first few years. I played behind Rich Gannon, and then Jim McMahon came, and then Warren Moon came, and then just looking for opportunities. So love playing for Denny Green, and just great group of coaches and teammates, and it's pretty unique place to be a part of.
A lot of people, even if they weren't that familiar with Coach Green, from those days, and they remember his years with the Arizona Cardinals.
Right.
The famous quote in that game against the Bears in the preseason.
Yeah.
So, do you have a story too about Coach Green?
Yeah, I think Denny was great as far as great in the drafting players and developing players. And I think he was great with coaches. I think about the coaches we had when I first got there was we had Tony Dungy and Brian Billick, who later won a Super Bowl with Baltimore, and Monty Kiffin was the defense coordinator, defensive linebacker coach, and later became a legend in Tampa Bay, and Tom Moore, who's won all kinds of Super Bowls, is still with Tampa Bay now, and just a great staff. Tyrone Willingham became a head coach. So a lot of guys, he developed coaches, developed players. And my first 7 years there, we went to the playoffs 6 times. And I don't think any of us got their due there as far as how great the teams were. We had some great teams. We just didn't make a deep run in the playoffs, lost the first round every year. But I'm thankful for Denny. And a lot of you'll still hear guys now on TV that are announcing games, Robert Smith or Chris Carter or whoever the other guys are. We will always refer to what Denny used to say. You know what I mean? And but he just made a big impact on all of our careers.
During your final year in Minnesota, you crossed paths with the legendary Randy Moss. Randy had you watched the documentaries on his career, talking about his roots to West Virginia, and I guess also the ties to Notre Dame and Florida State, and then circumstances led him to Marshall. But talk about that season that you spent with, having the opportunity to throw to a tremendous wideout, one of the best, and in some folks' opinions, as good as anybody that's ever played the game.
Yeah, obviously Randy just made the Hall of Fame a couple years back, and we all watched him in college. Phenomenal athlete. I remember when he was at Florida State for a little bit, and as soon as we drafted him, I felt late in the draft process because whatever those reasons were. But I remember Coach Rick and Danny Canal, they're like, holy smokes, you cannot throw it far enough for this guy. He is so fast and so great. And so we all remember him at Marshall lighting it up. And then so we got him at Minnesota, and I threw his first 2 touchdown passes, change right, base right. Change right, speed right, bomb was the call. And then the next touchdown was train right, jet right, 748 wide shell. I threw him on a post. But I remember, funny thing, we were in our meeting rooms on Wednesday mornings. We'd always go through the scouting of the other team. So our offensive line coach would stand up and talk about the defensive players and how big they were and what their stunts were. Then the linebacker coach would stand up and he would talk about, our running back coach would stand up and talk about linebackers of, how big they were, what are their tendencies and those kind of things. And so then Axe Hubbard was our receivers coach. He'd stand up and talk about the defensive coverage as well. I remember Randy, he used a couple of choice words, but he just told him to sit his butt down. We didn't need to go over any scouting report of any defender because we were just going to run right by him. We were going to score against him, the other team, no matter what they ran, what the coverage was, no matter what it was. And so it was awesome to play with Randy. And I remember he told me, he said, I'm never running full speed unless Deion Sanders, Dale Carter, or Daryl Green are guard me. He says, other than that, I'm setting them up and you throw as far as you can and I'll go get it. And that's what he could do. Very, very, very smart, competitive guy, and pretty awesome to throw his first 2 touchdown passes to him, but just to really watch his career, admire the impact that he made on the game. I think he was the best deep ball guy ever at catching the deep ball. And he really changed a lot of the way other teams played coverages and changed other teams the way they drafted corners and safeties to play against him.
In addition to those 2 different stints with the Minnesota Vikings, I mentioned the Redskins, Tampa Bay Bucks, and Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, that time with the Bucks, those 4 seasons in Tampa Bay really had to stand out for obvious reasons, and you had the opportunity to not only play for Tony Dungy and John Gruden, but and I want to talk more about those gentlemen in a moment, but that 2002 team that was absolutely loaded, and you guys won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, it was awesome. When I chose to go to Tampa, it was for a couple of reasons. One, I thought it was the best contract that I could have, security-wise. And 2, I'll be honest with you, it was a place I wanted to go to be the first quarterback that ever won a Super Bowl for the franchise. That had 3 guys that had won them at different other franchises with Steve Young, who was there, won it with San Fran, and Doug Williams, who ended up winning it with Washington, and Trent Dilfer, who had won it with Baltimore. But that was a big reason for me to go there. And Tony Dungy was the coach when I first went there. Had a great relationship with him. He'd been in Minnesota for 3 years, and so I just felt comfortable with him also. And after a year, they fired him. They said he wasn't good enough. Kicked him out of Tampa. Then he later went on to win his Super Bowl in Indianapolis and become a Hall of Fame coach. So it's funny what people say about you sometimes, but he was an incredible coach, and the impact he made on the community of Tampa was pretty impactful still to this day. And then brought in Coach Gruden. He brought a bunch of moves in free agency, brought in Keenan McCardell and Joe Giravicius and Robin Oben and Kerry Jenkins and Michael Pittman. And I think we brought in 15 to 17 guys in free agency. So he upgraded our team. He inspired us, made us a better team in the end. And so it's just incredible to say I was, a Buccaneer for those 4 years, and to accomplish what we did, win a Super Bowl, was pretty fun to say that we did it.
Yeah, I know Coach Dungy has multiple books on the market, and I read I believe it's his first book, Quiet Strength, and it was a tremendous read. Definitely recommend it to anyone who enjoys reading, but just so much respect for him. Like you said, not only was a unbelievable football coach, but just his demeanor, like you saw him in as you know, a head coach has to be true to himself. You have some that are more fiery, like Coach Gruden, and then some like Coach Dungy that are more stoic and just even keel. But really enjoyed both of those personalities, and and like you said, Coach Dungy, as good as he was on the football field as a head coach, he was even better in the community and everything he did for that area and the other regions of the country he's lived in.
No doubt about it. I mean, even to this day, he's still well respected. He's written some books that have gone, top of the food chain, and when you hear his words, when he says something, if he tweets something, like it's very meaningful. There's thought behind it, a lot of wisdom behind it. And he was a great coach. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat as a coach. I mean, you got some guys that are hyper, some guys are yellers, some guys are screamers. But all this, at the end of the day, you just want to respect your coach for his knowledge, the way he impacts the team. And so I appreciate the way he coached. I appreciate the way Gruden coached. Different ways to do it, But I just remember there's always been respect for Tony Dungy. in the way he's handled himself on the field, but off the field, his family, and obviously his character and faith.
With Coach Gruden, of course, I think 7, 8 seasons, and they had Gruden's quarterback camp, a very entertaining show that ESPN would put out, and Coach Gruden, some of the things he'd say, and this goes back to his coaching days, but it was always entertaining. You'd have a rookie quarterback, and some of the play calls that are very lengthy, and
Right.
And some of those quarterbacks and were struggling to remember those play calls, and he said, "Hey, give me somebody else that can remember the play."
No doubt, right? No doubt about that. So, yeah, he kind of jumped in. I think NFL Films was there at practice one day, and I think he had Chris Sims was the quarterback, and I think the play was South right F left, 72 Y stick Z spot, and he just called the letters wrong, called the formation wrong, personnel wrong, and he just ripped him, and it kind of went out. It was kind of funny with us. Obviously, Chris wasn't happy with it, but his plays were lengthy, they were wordy, but I really enjoyed playing for Gruden. He's a really good teacher of teaching football, teaching plays, teaching the defense, the ability to audible out of plays, and I really thought Gruden. Actually, we texted today. We just have a really good relationship, and he impacted a lot of lives, a lot of careers, and so thankful for him that I got to play for him.
No doubt, as somebody that loves the game the way we do, you got to just love his passion, and that's one of the reasons that the Gruden's quarterback camp, or like you said, when he would be mic'd up, that's the reason that was so appealing to viewers, because of his intensity.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And those things, like those quarterback schools, when you saw them, it was a great show. And Gruden, you only get to see little highlights of that show when he did it, but he would spend 3 days on evaluating a player before they came in to do that TV show. So, I'm telling you, he was in the office at 4 a.m. and he stayed late, and he was demanding, but it was actually fun to play for him. The reason why I say that is because you were with him at all times. He'd give you the playbook. He would install the plays for you. You would agree on plays. You would disagree on plays. You were with him at the walkthrough. You were with him in the practice. You were with him in the film afterwards. It wasn't like he just installed the play and then went and worked his game plan in a different room. Some coordinators do that. They leave you with your QB coach, and you don't see the coordinator all week. But you were rubbing shoulders with Gruden all week long, and he was great at analogies, great at teaching the game, and so I do miss those QB shows that he did, and he was entertaining for a lot of people. But he shared a lot of knowledge also.
And I talked about in Minnesota, you had the chance to play with Randy Moss, and there in Tampa, you had a tremendous wideout in zone right out of USC and Keyshawn Johnson.
Yeah, listen, I played with some great receivers at Minnesota. I can't name them all, but I actually threw Chris Carter and Tim Brown their 100th touchdown pass, through Randy Moss's first touchdown pass, through Warren Sapp his first touchdown pass, through Champ Bailey his first reception. I got to play. The receivers I had in Tampa were awesome. I love playing with Keyshawn too. Keyshawn and Keenan McCardell had great hands. Joe Jaravicious and Terrell Owens later, and Jason Witten later in Dallas. But Keyshawn, he was great to play with. You see him now on TV, and he was actually one of the easiest receivers I ever played with. He wrote that book a long time ago, Get Me the Damn Ball, and when he wrote it, I couldn't believe he wrote it. But if you actually played with him, he never put pressure on me as a quarterback to get him the ball. I remember one time we were playing the St. Louis Rams, and he didn't have a catch at halftime, and I said, "Hey, Key, hey, I'm gonna get you some balls here in the second half. Don't worry." He said, "Brad, don't worry about it. I want to win the game. Just make the reads, and I'll get my catches." And I think that game he actually caught 6 balls in the second half. But he was great to play with, and so thankful that we won a Super Bowl together.
So let's talk about life post football. You have sons that are involved in the game. Obviously, Max began his career playing with LSU, and now he's with Jimbo Fisher, former Florida State head coach that led the Seminoles to a national championship. So talk about life after football, and having the opportunity to be involved with your sons in something you guys are so passionate about.
Yep, I played 17 years in the NFL, and when I retired, I was right at 40 years old, and then when I was done, I'm like, man, what am I doing next? I know I did not want to get into broadcasting. I know I did not want to get into coaching in college or pro level. I really want to be with my family. So my wife, Nikki, and I, we've been married now for 23 years. We lived in Tallahassee for a long time. And then we moved to Athens, Georgia. But when I got out, I started coaching a lot of youth, coaching my kids, Max and Jake, coached all their youth teams, the middle school teams, got into high school coaching, and had done that for 13 years. So, but it's fun watching your kids grow up. And the kind of cool thing about it, you kind of get to watch them have their passion. They don't remember when I played. They've seen some highlights if I bring them out. They don't. They think of me as some just old guy, overweight guy, and that's been coaching. But it's pretty cool that I've been able to coach them all these years. And Max, it's obviously easy to coach him because he's a quarterback and how to take a snap and 3 and 5 step drop and read coverages. But my other son, Jake, he's at LSU. I mean, he's at Texas A&M now also. And but I didn't know how to teach him how to block or run routes, but I could always throw him a football. But it's going to be fun to watch them at Texas A&M play and compete with each other and kind of live out their dreams.
So in addition to that, you talk about still following your alma mater, Florida State. I referenced Jimbo Fisher's time there. Whatever some situation didn't seem as though he and the administration, athletic administration, university administration, that everybody was aligned there. So he elected to move on to the opportunity at Texas A&M. But talk about the Seminoles and obviously Coach Taggart was there, and now Mike Norvell. Slowly but surely, it seems to be getting the program back to respectability.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's pretty cool. Jimbo Fisher, I think they won the national championship in 2013, I think. And then the next year went to the Final Four BCS game. And then, then they kind of went through a struggle period. The last few years have been pretty rough, obviously. And but I think Mike Norvell is the right hire for Florida State. Getting the right people, getting the right players, getting the university back to where it belongs as far as a perennial ACC champion, get it back on the national stage. But it takes players. It does. And it takes players that, you'll find out how good your team is usually in the draft, in the spring. Did you have pro players or did you just have guys that were 4-year guys? And it takes both, but you better have some superstars. When I think about this 14-year run we had at Florida State of all, going to the national championships, and I think about guys that made the Hall of Fame, guys that made Pro Bowl, guys that were drafted in the first and second round. So I think Mike Norvell is the right guy to get that going back at Florida State and cheering those guys on for sure.
Before we move on and talk about, your prowess for trick shots, that's something I wanted to discuss before we wrap things up. But in this day and age of college football, with 2 sons playing for Texas A&M that we just discussed, and just recruitment much different than it was back in the mid-'80s and even after that. But the whole NIL situation, things that were illegal and things that schools probably, or not probably, definitely did, are now suddenly legal behind the NIL legislation. So just talk about, your thoughts on the way the college game's changed in that regard.
Yeah, the recruiting process, I mean, we didn't have social media. We didn't. You didn't know. It's hard to even get a media guide or a newspaper. Like, I don't think kids even have read a newspaper ever. And so how did you, when we were being recruited, like, how did you know what players were on that team where you were getting ready to head to school? Or you'd have to listen to the coach tell you in a phone call. You didn't have highlight films. You'd send a VHS tape to a school and hope they'd send it back to you so you could send it to another school. Like, now you have middle school kids that have instantaneous huddle highlights, and it's all over social media, and it's kind of crazy now. But that's the day and time of social media and being able to make highlight films, and times have changed. But the NIL deal, I don't know much about it. I don't know really how that's really working with all the schools, to be honest with you. I'm all for, people make as much money as they can. But at the end of the day, even regardless of that, I think the most important thing is be great at your craft. Be a great worker. Love the game. How can you get better? How can you compete? How can you win? And those are the things that will, make you money in the end, I think, regardless of I think I think the world has become more of a me kind of thing. But competition is real at the end of the day, and playing in the bright lights. I do think kids are better now, more athletic now as a whole, and so it's kind of fun to watch the game just evolve over time.
The guy that you're certainly familiar with, Shane Matthews, a two-time SEC Player of the Year at University of Florida. I've heard some of his thoughts on his podcast, Pod Up with Matthews in the Morning, just talking about how, in his opinion, he said he has no issue with the players being paid, but he's just afraid, as someone who loves college football, he's afraid of the game being impacted very negatively by this, because it doesn't really seem to have many boundaries, at least right at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what's crazy is you kind of want to go there. The NCAA, they can't really figure out how they want to do how do you want to do the national championship? You want 4 teams, or you want 8 teams? You want 6 teams? You want 12 teams? Like, I mean, come on, guys, you need to figure that out. Not alone what's going to happen with this NIL deal. Like, there's loopholes all over that thing. So, yeah, I don't know if there's a governing body, to be honest with you, over any of it. So, it's kind of the wild, wild west, I guess. But it's just happened the last year, so you don't really know what's taking place with all the rules, or all the companies, or all the people that are involved in all of it. So it's kind of unknown, to be honest with you. So it'll be interesting to see how it changes the landscape of football over the next 5 to 10 years for sure.
And as someone who spent 17 seasons in an NFL locker room, as well as the time you spent in a college locker room back during your Florida State days, like, how do you, and then also, based on what you may be hearing from your sons or other that are involved in the game currently, either coaching or playing, like, how do you see it impacting the dynamics of a locker room? If you have, it's not impossible to have a recruit getting more money than a guy currently on the team, or maybe, your quarterback, or, those guys at certain positions getting significant money, and then the offensive linemen who are providing the protection and opening the holes, not getting nearly as much, even though you do have programs like Texas and others who are, getting $50,000, $60,000 or more for an offensive lineman.
I don't know. You're always hearing these kind of numbers thrown out. So I don't know how it really works. You hope that kids would be, they'll have you got to pay taxes on all that money too, if it's true, and how that really works. And those are the dynamics we're going to talk about. Like, is there jealousy amongst the team? Is there jealousy amongst the head coach? Is he still getting the money from his radio and TV shows, or is it going more to the kids? I mean, there's all kinds of things that this whole thing can go. So I think we just got to play it out over time. But I'm really, what happens now, you find more kids are more focused on, on the social media part of it, trying to build their brand. The brand is built really on the field by your production. That's why I go, be great at your craft. How great can you become? And then, if you're a pro player, then the big money will come in the end, more than just trying to, I'm not going to say nickel and dime, because the money is money, but the money is more in the pro level than it is in college.
Final thing I have for you, you're there in College Station, Texas, some very famous Texas A&M alums and, Texas natives, and certainly the Dude Perfect guys, their infamous trick shots,
right?
nearly 60 million followers or whatever on YouTube, or subscribers, I should say. But, just talk about your background there. It's something I think anybody that, played basketball or other sports, it's something we did growing up in the backyard or at the YMCA and so forth. But talk about, just the direction that you've had a lot of fun with that on social media, be it Twitter or TikTok or what have you. Yeah.
When the pandemic hit a couple of years ago, we were laying around the house. We were working out. We were eating, kind of spent a lot of family time. It's really cool for our family, because we had just more family time than we've ever had, playing board games or whatever it was. And then that's when my kids were on TikTok. I'm like, what are you guys doing? They were doing the dances and those kind of things. And so I said, let me look at it. So I looked at it, and I saw there was a lot of talented people out there, to be honest with you. And so when I first got on TikTok, I started making videos of all my workout videos and some of my highlights of my career. Then then I said, there's some guys that can make these trick shots. And they were hitting a basketball with a shovel and doing some crazy shots. But, obviously I played football and basketball in college and all that kind of stuff. So I started doing this thing of making shots, multiple shots in a row, and then finishing it with a crazy long shot. So basically, I might spin one off my finger, off my head, throw it over the backboard, and then throw a football the length of the court and make it. And then I did one from the corner pocket of the end zone, corner pocket, hit the second pole. And I've probably done 75 videos of just making these trick shot videos. And I try to do them in sequence kind of thing when I make them. So I've had fun with it. I put it on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. And just, I have fun with it. And it kind of gives me exercise and try to have a lot of humor. And a lot of people laugh at me doing it, but it's something that I just enjoy doing, the challenge of trying to make some of these shots.
Yeah, my 10-year-old son and I, back during the pandemic, like you said, when there wasn't a whole lot else going on, more family time. And I remember my son and I, we did that, not to the extent that you guys did, but, I remember, making a shot over the carport and, and all those sorts of things. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Well, really appreciate your time this evening. You've been very generous, and we'd love to have you back on in the fall during the season as your schedule allows. Obviously, you're going to be extremely busy going to watch the Aggies play wherever they're playing, but at some point, maybe on an open week for Texas A&M or something, or maybe preseason, we'd love to have you back on and talk some college football.
Yeah, it'd be great. Reach out anytime. Love to be a part of it, and I appreciate you. Appreciate you having me on your show. Thank you.
Appreciate everyone tuning in tonight, whether it was on YouTube, Facebook, or pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. You can find us. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, like and follow us on Facebook, and then be sure to leave us a comment, follow us, like us, whatever those platforms consider it. Be it Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, pretty much anywhere. You can find podcasts. Like I said, you can find us also on Twitter at the Sports OBJ, on Instagram at the Sports Objective. And, for Super Bowl champion quarterback Brad Johnson, and I'm Bubba Rosenbaum. You've been watching and listening to the Sports Objective. Have a great one, everyone. Take care.